The red tally light blinked twice, then locked solid. Live. Inside CNN Studio 3B, the air didn't just hum, it pulsed. This was no ordinary political stage. This was where reputations are born and sometimes destroyed. The room was cold, not from the temperature, but from the tension, sharp, surgical. 100 lights bathed the stage in sterile glow, bouncing off glass panels and polished podiums. Everything gleamed, except the expressions on people's faces. The audience was a curated mix of analysts, partisans, veterans, teachers, doubters, all seated in rows like jury members for a trial no one could rehearse. Cameras hovered from above like hawks tracking every breath. This was CNN's most watched political special, America Decides 2025. But tonight it wasn't just about policy or party lines. Tonight, it was about truth, humiliation, and whether one woman's calm could dismantle decades of ego. And seated at the center of it all, arms folded, chin slightly raised, was Donald J. Trump. Across from him, not yet on camera, stood a woman who had been underestimated since the first day she spoke up in a classroom. Jasmine Crockett. Tonight the fight wasn't for airtime. It was for memory, dignity, and a future that didn't belong to loud voices, but to earned ones. He didn't waste time. Trump leaned forward on the podium, gripped the edge with one hand, and in that familiar booming tone launched the shot he'd been waiting to fire. She's too dumb to lead. The words dropped like an anvil, live, unfiltered, heard by over 42 million people. Some in the crowd gasped. Others chuckled nervously. But Trump didn't flinch. He grinned, proud of the insult like it was a punchline he'd rehearsed. He turned to the audience with that trademark smirk and added, "I mean, come on, folks. She's not from Harvard. She's not even close. They want her to run this country. She couldn't pass the test to carry my notes." Laughter rose, scattered at first, mostly from the MAGA loyalists in the back. But even that felt unsure. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't frown. She didn't even look surprised. She just breathed. In, out, slow, controlled. The camera zoomed in on her face, searching for a crack, a twitch, a flash of insecurity. But there was nothing. She sat still, composed, patient, terrifyingly calm. Trump mistook that silence for weakness. "I thought this was a serious debate," he scoffed, waving his hand toward her like she was an intern who had wandered on set. But instead, they brought in a radical activist with a low IQ and a big mouth. And just like that, the tone of the evening shifted. Because what came next wasn't just a comeback. It was a reckoning. She didn't take the bait. No eye roll, no sarcastic smile, no fiery comeback. Jasmine Crockett simply reached down slowly, deliberately into her sleek black bag and pulled out a single item, a red envelope, sealed in deep, glossy wax. It shimmered under the studio lights like a warning covered in velvet. She placed it on the table in front of her, not with drama, not with flair, but with the kind of precision that says, "I don't need to shout." This speaks louder. The entire room shifted. Even Trump stopped smirking. The envelope sat there, quiet, small, but suddenly heavier than anything else in the room. The kind of weight that makes people sit up straighter because they feel it before they understand it. She didn't open it. She didn't explain it. She just let it sit, like a loaded weapon, like a courtroom file, like a truth too sharp to touch without gloves. And when she finally spoke, her voice was low. Not angry, not shaken, but controlled, calm, razor clean. "I don't take tests issued by men who sealed their own transcripts in 1999. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Trump's smile twitched, not from humor but from impact. She still hadn't raised her voice. But somehow, the room was quieter than ever. Jasmine adjusted the red envelope with 2 fingers, calm, focused, like a chess player moving a final piece. Then, without even glancing at Trump, she looked into the audience and said, "Let's try something simple. Not law, not politics, just logic." The silence sharpened. Even the moderator leaned forward. "If 5 machines take 5 minutes to make 5 parts," she said. Clearly, how long would one machine take to make 1 part? Trump blinked. Twice. He leaned back, slightly smirked, and answered fast, too fast. 1 minute, easy. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Not a laugh, but a collective cringe. A few people exchanged glances. Others just closed their eyes. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just exhaled slowly and replied, "Incorrect. It's 5 minutes. The rate doesn't change. One machine, one part 5 minutes. Trump's grin collapsed. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because it wasn't just a wrong answer. It was a public failure. Simple, undeniable, in front of 42 million people. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't need to. The truth did it for her. No one expected that moment to hit so hard. Not the producers, not the moderator, not even Trump. He thought he could dominate her with noise, with labels, with old tactics. But Jasmine didn't fight back with volume. She didn't throw punches. She simply placed a red envelope, asked a simple question, and exposed a weakness so public it echoed. And then the room went silent. Not a polite silence. Not the kind that waits for the next line. This was the kind of silence that lands on your chest like weight. It pressed on every rib. It filled the space between breath and regret. 42 million people watched, and no one said a word. Even the MAGA hats in the back stopped clapping. Even the moderator lowered his notes. Even the cameras paused, unsure whether to zoom in on Trump's stunned face or on Jasmine's stillness, which now felt more powerful than any scream. That silence didn't beg for attention. It demanded accountability. And from that moment on, the energy in the room changed. The game changed. The audience changed. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't a debate. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Before the cameras, before the envelope, before the silence that shook 42 million people, there was a little girl in East Texas sitting at a desk with a broken leg and a textbook older than she was. Jasmine Crockett, age 10, public school, budget slashed, underserved, forgotten. The fluorescent lights above her flickered like they were gasping for air. The AC didn't work in the fall, and in the winter the windows let in wind like whispers of failure. Her math book had someone else's name in it, written in pencil, then scratched out. The pages were torn. One corner had been bitten clean off. She didn't mind. She was used to inheriting other people's leftovers, even their dreams. While other schools had computer labs, hers had two machines, both unplugged, one missing a keyboard, and no one complained. Because no one was listening. Her teacher once told her gently, "You're smart, Jasmine, but don't expect much. This country doesn't reward girls who look like you for being clever." Jasmine didn't cry. That night she crawled under a blanket, turned on a flashlight, and read the Constitution page by page. Because even at 10, she knew something no system had taught her. If they won't give you the tools, you build them yourself. The books she studied from were older than her memories. Pages yellowed, corners curled, diagrams faded, history chapters that skipped over civil rights like they were an afterthought. Her 5th grade science book still listed Pluto as a planet. The school didn't have enough copies, so she had to share with 2 other students, rotating pages during class like ration light. And yet Jasmine read every single word. Not because she had to, but because she believed one thing: knowledge was her only way out. But the system had other plans. One day after a reading test, she'd aced her teacher, tired, underpaid, but not cruel, pulled her aside. She spoke softly, kindly. "Jasmine, you're smart, but don't dream too big. Girls like you, we don't get picked, we get pushed." She didn't mean to be harsh. She meant to prepare her. But that moment shattered something in Jasmine. Because it wasn't just a warning. It was a forecast, a prophecy the world expected her to believe. And Jasmine, she didn't argue. She just stared at her desk and memorized the insult. Not to accept it, but to one day return it as evidence. While Jasmine memorized insults in a broken-down classroom, her mother was scrubbing floors under fluorescent lights 2 zip codes away. Night shift, 11:00 p.m. to 7:00 a.m. every day, every week, every year. She worked in silence, rubber gloves on hands that used to play piano, now cracking from chemicals and overtime. Hospitals didn't notice her. Most people didn't. She wore a name tag that read staff, but to Jasmine, she was survival in human form. Every morning, Jasmine would wake up to the smell of ammonia and the soft sound of her mother washing uniforms in the sink. Some nights, her mother would return with swollen feet and trembling fingers. But she still placed 2 eggs on Jasmine's plate and whispered, "Baby, you keep reading. I'll keep working. That's how we win." There was never talk of college brochures, no tutors, no family friends in politics. Just one woman with a mop and one girl with a flashlight. That was the plan. Her mother would clean the floors of a world that refused to see her, so Jasmine could someday rise high enough to redesign it. Jasmine didn't get a prep school. She didn't have legacy admissions or last names that opened doors. What she had was a flashlight and a will that refused to flicker. She read legal briefs under her blanket, watched Supreme Court arguments on grainy internet streams, took notes between her mother's coughs. She memorized cases like prayers, Brown v. Board, Roe v. Wade, Miranda v. Arizona. Each one wasn't just a case, it was a battle someone dared to fight before her. But being a black woman in law school, that was a case of its own. She was one of 5 black women in a lecture hall of 130. Professors would ask her to speak for the community. Students mistook her for a janitor. One even said, "You got in on diversity, right?" She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She raised her GPA. She'd smile, then wreck their logic with sharper logic. No yelling, just precision. And in every class she passed, every paper she turned, in every debate she won, she was stitching her future robe. Not just a lawyer, a reckoning. It was her second semester. Jasmine had survived the first storm, the alienation, the cold stares, the subtle sabotage. But this wasn't subtle. He was a tenured professor. White, mid-60s, respected, quoted, published. He leaned forward in his office chair, eyes narrow. The door closed behind her. "You know," he said, "I've been teaching here for over 30 years. And in all that time, I've never seen a black woman make it to graduation." Silence. Not pity, not shock, just silence. He said it like a weather report, as if stating a fact, as if she should thank him for the honesty. Jasmine didn't cry. She didn't storm out. She just smiled slowly. "Well," she replied, "I guess you're about to witness history." She walked out, and on that walk the fear inside her broke and something unshakable took its place. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even look angry. She just held up the red envelope. The room that had just been laughing fell still. Even the camera zoomed in. Everyone expected her to make a scene, throw words, cry, fold, but instead she opened the flap and pulled out 3 folded pages. They weren't handwritten. They weren't emotional pleas. They were federal records, signed, stamped, time-stamped. The first page, transaction record, Internal Revenue Transfer, March 14th, to a private LLC registered to Donald J. Trump. The signature, a senior government official directly tied to classified fund allocations. Gasps. The second page, off-the-record authorization to redirect funds from FEMA Emergency Relief Post-Hurricane to that same LLC. And the third, a chain of email approvals hidden under a shell company IP, all time coded to the exact moment Trump told America we're helping hurricane victims. He lied, and now the receipts were in Jasmine's hands. After the red envelope dropped, the world didn't just gasp at the evidence. They looked at Jasmine Crockett differently. Who was this woman? Why did her hands not shake? Why did her voice stay calm when the most powerful man in America had just tried to humiliate her? Then the statements came in not from politicians, but from professors. 3 of them, from Yale, Howard, and Georgetown. They didn't just praise her response. They broke silence to say something they almost never say publicly. She didn't just argue well. She reframed constitutional context. Her rebuttal used case law precedent and economic data flawlessly. We're updating our curriculum this semester because of her. One of them admitted off the record, when I saw her pull out that document, I didn't see a politician. I saw a once-in-a-generation legal mind. She didn't shout. She didn't grandstand. She rewrote the damn rules. The room was still stunned. The red envelope had flipped the power dynamic. Trump, still seated, leaned toward his mic. But this time his voice was lower. Not sharp, not confident, just defensive. "So what? You studied law. You don't understand power." The words fell flat. There was no applause, no Fox News cheerleaders. Even his usual defenders shifted in their seats. Because in that moment, everyone saw it. Trump wasn't in control anymore. And Jasmine, she didn't even look at him. She just leaned back, calm as ever, and said, "Power without principle is just a threat. And threats don't scare me." One sentence. The room cracked open in gasps, and for the first time, Trump looked small. Just hours after the hearing, CNN dropped what they called an unrelated academic report. But it wasn't unrelated at all. The headline flashed in red across the screen: "Breaking Trump's Wharton transcript sealed by legal order since 1999. People blinked. Wait, what? This was the man who mocked Jasmine Crockett's intelligence, the man who said, "You don't understand power." Yet here he was, a graduate of Wharton Business School, with grades sealed like a state secret for over 2 decades. The report added fuel. He had personally ordered the lock on those records, with legal threats sent to any professor who might leak them. Jasmine didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Twitter exploded. Cable news anchors smirked. And within minutes, the hashtags were flying. Hashtag Wharton Whisper, hashtag Q Leakgate, hashtag Let Us See It. By sunset, a former professor anonymously commented, "Let's just say his GPA wasn't presidential." It started as a call into a late-night MSNBC panel. The topic, Jasmine Crockett versus Trump. Then a woman mid-50s, clear voice, no hesitation, was patched in live. "I was in Wharton class of '68, she said, same year as Donald Trump." The panel paused. She continued, "You want to know why no one's seen his grades? It's simple. We never saw him either." Now the room leaned in. We had a name for him. We called him the ghost chair. His name was always on the roster, but the chair empty, always empty. The host blinked. "Wait, are you saying Trump never showed up?" She laughed. "Not once in my Econ 201 class. Not once in any real debates. Just whispers, favors tutors. That man studied power, not knowledge." Twitter went into flames. TikTok had remixes by morning. And Jasmine, she still hadn't said a single word about Trump's IQ because now America was doing it for her. The cameras had stopped. The lights were dimmer now. The Senate hearing was technically over, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't done. She walked to the cluster of reporters just outside the chamber, held up a USB drive, and said one sentence, "This is from a 14-year-old girl, a student at Trump Academy." Gasps, murmurs, the click of pens and microphones. She plugged it into a portable speaker. A soft, shaky teenage voice played, "We had to sign these forms like really strict NDAs. They said if we talked about anything, our families could be sued." The voice cracked. "He said we had to learn power etiquette. That meant knowing when to speak or not. And if you asked questions, you were called disloyal." Journalists froze. No one moved. Jasmine's eyes didn't blink. She let the recording finish. "My friend asked about college, about scholarships. And the head instructor said, 'You're not here to dream. You're here to obey.'" Then silence. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. The news cycle had just shifted again. And Jasmine wasn't smiling. She looked like someone who knew more was coming. The recording hadn't ended. There was still one last part. The teenage voice returned, softer, more broken now. "One time I stayed after class to ask a question about running for student council." A small pause, a breath. "He was there, Mr. Trump. I thought he'd encourage me." She sniffled, but he looked straight at me and said, "Girls like you don't become leaders. You follow them." Now there was no noise, not even camera shutters. He told me I was lucky to be in the room, that people like me shouldn't expect more. And then the voice broke completely. I was 14, and that was the first time I felt ashamed for being a girl. Jasmine didn't say a word, but someone behind the camera whispered, "She could have been my daughter." In that moment, the story stopped being about politics and started being about decency. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't just fall, it presses down on everyone in the room. Jasmine was still standing, holding the speaker. The audio had ended, but the emotion hadn't. That's when it happened. A woman from the back, hair in a tight bun, wearing a plain gray cardigan, stood up slowly. Her voice broke the silence. "That's my daughter." Gasps. The entire room turned toward her. She stepped forward, shaking. "She never told me everything just nightmares. She used to wake up crying, saying she wasn't good enough, that she was stupid. I thought it was just teenage fear." She looked at Jasmine, then at the cameras, then down at her own trembling hands. "I didn't know it was him. I would have pulled her out of there so fast she couldn't speak anymore." A Capitol Hill officer gently reached for her arm, but Jasmine stepped down, walked over and embraced her. 2 women. One who survived it, one who finally believed it. There was no applause, no boos, just stillness. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the buzz of a distant camera adjusting focus, and nothing else. Then a shift. In the third row, a man in a red MAGA cap lowered his head. Not out of shame, out of something deeper, recognition. Others followed. They weren't liberals. They weren't activists. They were veterans, farmers, steelworkers. They had come here expecting fireworks, but what they saw was a child voice and a mother's grief. And suddenly party lines didn't matter. One woman whispered to her husband, "What if that had been our granddaughter?" Another man in his 60s clenched his fist, then quietly removed his MAGA hat and set it on his lap. "This isn't about red or blue anymore," he muttered. "It's about right and wrong." And just like that, the hearing room, the same place where insults had been flung like grenades, became something else. A mirror. Jasmine stood at the podium again. This time the cameras weren't just watching, they were listening. Her voice was calm. Her words carried the weight of generations. "No one should be humiliated by someone wearing the flag." She paused. The silence in the room was heavier than any applause. Not in classrooms, not in boardrooms, not behind a podium draped in red, white, and blue. Her eyes scanned the audience, veterans, teachers, mothers, fathers, children. We talk about forgiveness like it's automatic, like it's something you just say on Sundays. But forgiveness is earned. It begins with remembering. Jasmine's voice cracked just a little, but that small crack made the room lean in closer. That little girl you heard, she forgave quietly, without headlines, without microphones. And she kept going, her gaze locked on the camera. If our children can forgive us, can we forgive ourselves? The room erupted, not in cheers, but in tears. Nods and a long, deep breath. The cameras caught it all. Trump's face reddened. His hands slammed the desk hard enough to make the microphone rattle. He stood almost lunging forward. "This is rigged. This is a setup. CNN, the moderators, her school, all of you are in on it." His voice cracked, furious and desperate. "You've all seen it. This whole thing is a political ambush. It's fake, fake, fake." Staffers behind the scenes exchanged nervous glances. The audience was silent, stunned. For the first time, Trump was not in control, not just politically, but emotionally. His breathing was rapid. His eyes darted wildly. He tugged at his collar like a man choking, and then his voice dropped almost a whisper. "You people should be ashamed of yourselves." Just when Trump was trying to regain control, CNN hit him with a video clip, a blast from 2016. The screen lit up. Trump, younger, full of swagger, stood on a packed stage. "I have the best brain. Ask anyone. People are always shocked how smart I am. I'm a very stable genius." The crowd laughed, but not the polite kind. It was the laughter that cuts through pretense, the laughter of disbelief. Trump's face froze. His confident grin vanished. He turned away from the screen as if betrayed. Jasmine didn't smile. She simply let the moment settle like a judge passing sentence. The room felt heavy. The truth wasn't just spoken, it was exposed. The moderator posed a simple question. A logic puzzle, nothing fancy. If 5 machines take 5 minutes to make 5 parts, how long does 1 machine take to make 1 part? Trump smirked. He blinked once, twice. 1 minute, he said confidently. The room held its breath, then laughter. Not the laughter of joy, not the laughter of comedy, but the laughter of disbelief, the laughter of someone caught off guard. Jasmine looked at him, calm and precise. "Incorrect. 5 minutes." "The rate doesn't change." Silence fell again. Trump's confident grin faltered. The room shifted uncomfortably. The laughter wasn't cruel. It was the sound of a man's facade cracking. The room was quiet once more. Jasmine's eyes never left Trump's. She leaned forward just slightly, her voice low, calm. "You wanted to test my intelligence, but now the whole country is testing yours." Trump's face tightened, his lips pressed into a thin line. No words came. Not because he couldn't speak, but because he had nothing left to say. The weight of her words hung in the air. A silence filled with truth and the beginning of a reckoning. The room held its breath. Trump sat there, silent, motionless. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Not because he couldn't speak, but because there was nothing left to say. For the first time, the man who once ruled rooms with his voice was powerless. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of doubt, every moment of defeat. The silence said it all. No bravado, no comebacks, just the final crack in a shattered empire. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, yet weighted with an almost sacred silence. Among the hundreds of faces, some skeptical, some hopeful, some weary, a single figure stood out. A veteran weathered by time with lines of countless battles etched into his face slowly raised his hand. The red MAGA pin glittered under the studio lights, a symbol that once commanded unwavering loyalty, pride, and allegiance. But now his hand trembled slightly. With deliberate care, he unclipped the pin from his lapel. Time seemed to slow. Every eye in the room fixed on this small but profound gesture. The pin, once worn like a badge of honor, now lay quietly in the palm of his hand, inert, heavy with meaning. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His eyes lowered in quiet contemplation. A subtle nod, a farewell to a chapter of blind faith, a silent signal that the era of unquestioned power was ending. The weight of this simple act echoed louder than any speech or protest. It was a silent confession, a powerful rejection, and above all, a hopeful step toward change. In that moment, the crowd wasn't just an audience. They became witnesses to a turning tide, a collective exhale of the past, giving way to the possibility of a better future. In a high school classroom in Atlanta, the teacher paused the lesson. She clicked on the video. The students' chatter faded as Jasmine Crockett appeared on screen. Her voice, strong, clear, unyielding, filled the room. No one should be humiliated by someone wearing the flag. The students leaned forward. Some whispered. Some wiped away tears. The teacher watched quietly, knowing this was more than just politics. This was a moment of awakening. A lesson in courage, dignity, and justice. After the video ended, she looked at her class and said, "This is what it means to stand up for what's right, even when the world tries to silence you." The room was silent, but inside hearts were beating louder than ever. In a small town far from the capital, a 10-year-old girl watched Jasmine's speech on a cracked tablet, her eyes wide with wonder. She turned to her mother and whispered, "I want to be a lawyer like her." Her mother smiled through tears. "You can be anything you want." The girl's words spread, from classrooms to living rooms, from city streets to rural farms. Jasmine's story had become a beacon, a reminder that courage and justice know no age. The hallway was alive with quiet reverence. As Jasmine moved through the crowd, hands reached out, eager, hopeful. Each handshake wasn't just a greeting. It was a pledge, a silent vow to justice, truth, and change. Faces of veterans, teachers, mothers, and fathers lit up with respect and gratitude. Some whispered prayers, others nodded firmly. For them, Jasmine was more than a congresswoman. She was a symbol, a beacon of courage standing tall against the shadows of doubt and despair. With every step, the energy grew stronger. A wave of hope sweeping through the chamber, and Jasmine's steady calm carried it all forward. Jasmine paused, her eyes soft but steady. She spoke not just to the room, but to the millions watching at home. If our children can forgive us the mistakes, the failures, the silence, then can we find it in ourselves to forgive and heal? Her voice carried the weight of generations, the pain of history, and the hope for the future. The room fell silent, but inside every heart a spark had been lit. A call to reflection, a call to change. Because forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. And it begins with us. The office was silent. Only the soft hum of the city outside filtered through the window. Jasmine sat alone, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed play. Her mother's voice filled the room. "You didn't shout, 'Baby,' you made the whole room look up. You made us proud." Jasmine closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her like a healing balm. For years she had carried the weight of doubt, of expectation, of fighting to be seen. Now in this quiet moment she felt it all. Pride, strength, peace. She smiled softly, pressed replay. "You made the whole room look up." In the quiet solitude of her office, Jasmine pulled out an old folded letter. The edges worn, the paper faded. It was her Harvard rejection letter dated 2002. She held it for a moment, feeling the weight of years past. Then with steady hands, she lit a match. The flame flickered, catching the paper's edge. Slowly, the letter curled and burned. Smoke spiraled upward, carrying away doubt, fear, and the sting of rejection. This wasn't just a letter, it was a symbol of doors slammed shut and of the strength to open new ones. As the ashes settled, Jasmine smiled softly. She was no longer defined by what she was denied. She was defined by how she rose. The news broke like thunder across the nation. CNN's ticker flashed: Bright Education Equity Act, drafted by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, passed 241 to 191. In the halls of Congress, whispers turned to cheers. Jasmine stood quietly, absorbing the moment. This was more than a victory. It was a promise fulfilled, a testament to the power of persistence. The bill wasn't just words on paper. It was a lifeline to millions of children. Children who deserved equal chances, equal respect, and equal dignity. Across the country, messages poured in, from teachers, parents, students, and veterans alike. They celebrated a new dawn, a future where justice in education was no longer a dream, but a reality. The room was buzzing with quiet celebration. Jasmine made her way through the crowd, graceful and composed. Suddenly, an elderly woman stepped forward. Her eyes glistened with tears. With a firm but gentle grip, she shook Jasmine's hand. "My granddaughter wants to be like you." Jasmine paused, looking into the woman's eyes. A smile softened her face. "Not just me, but every child waiting to be seen." The crowd hushed. The moment hung in the air, a bridge between generations, a promise of legacy and hope. The room fell silent. Jasmine looked out, her gaze steady and unflinching. Her voice was calm, but every word cut deep. "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is let a smart woman finish her sentence." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. No cheers followed, no applause, just a profound stillness. Because intelligence doesn't need proving. It only needs listening. And in that moment, everyone knew. The story wasn't just hers, it was ours. A call to respect, to hear, and to finally make space for voices too long silenced. This story teaches us that true strength lies not only in intelligence, but in resilience, courage, and the power to stand firm against injustice. It reminds us that voices long silenced deserve to be heard, and that respect and equality are not given. They are earned through persistence and unwavering conviction. No matter the obstacles, your worth is not defined by others' doubts or denials, but by your own determination to rise and make a difference. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Exposed Stories for more powerful truths and stories that challenge the status quo. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment where courage and justice take center stage. Join us because your voice matters, and together we can amplify the unheard.